Yeah, thanks so much everyone for hopping on. Tessa here from Pipeline Solutions and John as well, Pipeline Solutions. And today we are joined by Libby DeLucien from WootRecruit, which provides comprehensive, done-for-you recruiting solutions for businesses in high turnover industries, something we know a little bit about in boutique fitness. So Libby is a mom and entrepreneur from a business-oriented family, and she founded WootRecruit, which is a SaaS business or software business that helps over 500 companies globally with hiring and Organize It, a cleaning and organizing company that's been around since 2017. So we're super excited to have Libby here, and we're super excited to have you all joining our staffing series. We understand the challenges around staffing in our space, and although it's not necessarily a focus of what we do at Pipeline Solutions, we wanted to take the opportunity to bring together a couple of really great minds in the space to put some sessions together and maybe give us some different perspectives and playbooks and all the fun things that we can use and take into what we do day to day. So with that, Libby, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Great. I'm going to just share my screen so we can get started and jump right in. I want to share a little bit about me. I had no idea how to start a SaaS or even get into the recruiting space. I did it out of pure need because I couldn't staff my own business. I was desperate. It was kind of like one of those moments where when your back is up against the wall, you innovate. And so my organizing side of me came out. I've always been super, super organized, systems oriented. And I created a process that I now have helped over 700 companies use in their recruiting efforts and coached probably over 1,000 people total when it comes to recruiting. So I'm going to share something with you guys, and we're going to call this our Recruiting Flywheel. We also have a bunch of these videos on YouTube, so you can always check us out on YouTube. I will drop the links in at the end of where you can find us. But when we talk about recruiting, I want to talk about it in a framework, in a flywheel. So many of us were taught to recruit, hey, if I need somebody, let's throw an ad on Indeed. Let's start to recruit. But when we start because we need someone, we're already 3 or 4 weeks behind the game. I don't know how long it takes for you guys to onboard somebody, but typically it takes at least a week or two to even get some candidates flowing through your pipeline, and another couple weeks to interview, and then another couple weeks to onboard once we find somebody. So we have a process, and we call this a recruitment flywheel, where we're measuring each step in the recruiting process to show you exactly what's broken in your recruiting process or where some gaps are, and also where are you performing exceptionally. Because you could be really great at a certain part of your process and not even realize it, or not even realize that there's a gap between your scheduled and your show rate. So we're going to go over these numbers. This is going to be a very, very numbers-driven presentation or talk, because I want to show you guys, I want to prove to you that you can be better than average. Like, you can up your odds when it comes to recruiting if we just work at the process. So a little bit about me. I own Organize It. We do professional organizing, residential cleaning, commercial cleaning. I have over 100 employees in Organize It. I own WootRecruit, which is the recruiting software. I own Service Cart, which is another software. I do coaching in a space. It's called Cleaning Business Fundamentals. It's primarily coaching within the cleaning industry. So it's like commercial, residential, power washing, window washing, very big in that cleaning space. And then I have a podcast. It's all about entrepreneur, the journey, and how we become fearless in that entrepreneur journey. I'm also, like Tessa mentioned, a mom. I have a 26-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 6-year-old. They're all very organized. They were all born in April, and they're all 10 years apart. All very coincidental. And then I'm married, and I've been able to launch all these businesses in a second phase of my life. Prior to really being in the recruiting and residential space, or home service space, I owned a bar and restaurant. And so I'm very familiar with the bar industry, restaurant. I loved it and hated it, and I'll never do it again. It was so much work. If we think you have recruiting problems in this space, or even in my space and home service, try the bar business. It's just agonizing. It was agonizing. And I learned a lot of what we do now from just owning, in my past life, owning that bar in the restaurant, and went through a horrible divorce. And I had to start over. And I always say we don't start over, we start from our experience. And I needed something that was extremely low cost, because I went through divorce and ended up with like nothing. I walked out with nothing. And that's how I got in the cleaning and organizing space, because you don't need any money to start. You can start literally with the vacuum cleaner that you have in your house. Because a lot of people ask, how did I get into residential cleaning? And that's where we started, in that residential sector. And that's how I started. It was starting out of pure necessity to survive and be a great parent. Now I spend a ton of time just teaching and inspiring, and just showing others, like, how can we recruit? How can we hire great people? How can we keep those great people? And the one thing I've learned along the way is, recruiting has changed. We have our pre-COVID way of recruiting, then how we had to recruit during COVID. And I'm sure your industry was highly impacted, just like mine was during COVID. And then we have our post-COVID way of recruiting and what's important to people now. And I think that, the avatar of our employee changed with our pre-COVID, our COVID, and our post-COVID avatar. What does that ideal employee look like has changed 3 times in the last 4 years. And so I think that's why we also have a hard time recruiting, because that mindset evolved where our businesses kind of stayed static in our processes, in our benefits, and kind of what looked sexy to a new hire. Just like you guys, I'm sure this is one of my favorite pictures in my presentation. I had my daughter, she's now 6 years old, and I had just started my company. And I had not started WootRecruit yet, because I couldn't get myself out of the field. And I literally had to ask my husband to stop at a job on the way home from the hospital, because I didn't trust my own employees. And I only had like 2 at the time. And I didn't even trust them. And I said, "Hey, sweetie, I need you to stop by the office because I need to check on some stuff." And he's like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Yes." So literally 24 hours after I had my daughter, I had to stop by the office. And that for me was kind of like that breaking point. He's a saint, because everything we did, he was okay with. And this was a part of my life where I lacked a lot of things, but mainly trust in my own processes and trust in my own people. And, when we're up against that wall, when we're in times of desperation, we may feel burnt out and overwhelmed and tired, but actually this is when we start to innovate. This is one of the times where, if you allow, you can really change your business or change the way you do business. So we all have the same fears, right? We all have the same fears when it comes to recruiting. We're scared we're going to hire the wrong person. We're scared we're going to waste time. We're scared that if we don't hire, right, we can't grow. We're all scared to be overstaffed, or we're all scared to be understaffed. We all have those same fears. And the one thing I want to share with you guys right now is that 52% of your current employees are thinking about leaving. 52% of current employees are thinking about changing jobs. They're thinking about leaving, changing jobs. And I don't tell you this to scare you, but I tell you this for a wake-up call. I tell you so that you're aware of, man, maybe I should always be recruiting. Maybe I really need to create that process. because it's a statistic that we pulled, and I didn't come up with these numbers, right? But 52%. Imagine if I had 4 employees and half of them left, I'd lose half my staff. Like I'd only have 2. If I had 100, that means 50 people are thinking about changing jobs. And, you know, that's a scary thing. And so I want to break that myth, right? That myth of I don't need to hire until I need somebody. That I don't need to hire because I'm fully staffed. Oh, how many times have we heard like, oh, take down the ads. I found a perfect candidate. Stop recruiting. We're onboarding somebody on Monday. And then that new hire doesn't work out. They don't show up. They don't take your offer. And then we're right back in that same spot. So we have that myth, right? That myth that we don't need to hire when we're fully staffed. And I always want to push back on that myth, because the first thing I would say to you is, are you telling me that every single person on your team is an A player? That every single person on your team is a culture fit? Every person on your team is the right fit? And not one person can tell me that. Because if you tell me that, then you're lying. You cannot say that every single person is a great fit, an A player, fits the culture, fits the values of the company. So that's why we need to break that myth, and we need to start to always be recruiting, right? Always be recruiting doesn't mean always be hiring, because always be recruiting scares people. They're like, well, what if I don't want to hire somebody? Always be recruiting means you're always interviewing. You're always open to interviewing great candidates. You have an active pool of candidates in your pipeline. And so I want to break that myth of, hey, we're not going to do anything until we need somebody, not until we fire someone, not until they quit. Am I going to start to hire, start to put the job ad up? It should be a constant cycle in your business. And so we all want the same thing. We all want great profit, a great culture. We want A players. We want efficient employees. We all want the same thing. So my promise to you today is that you're going to have a clear understanding of where in your recruiting cycle or flywheel you can focus on today to get better results, right? Because recruiting is pretty in depth, but I'm going to break it down and we're going to go over some steps. And I'm just going to focus on the 3 core steps that are influenced by people. And I wanted to pick the 3 steps that are influenced by people because those are the things that we can control instantly to get instant results. So if you're like, where am I getting all my information from? These are just some stats that I pulled in the last 6 months. We've gotten our jobs in front of 155 million applicants. And we've had over 1 million people apply through our jobs. I've helped people schedule 280,000 interviews and helped them conduct 54,000 interviews in the last 6 months. So we have the data. We have tons and tons of data to say what is currently happening within that entry-level hire. So what we specialize in at WootRecruit is hiring W-2 entry-level employees, right? That's kind of that core of what we do. We also do management, sales, but that's our core, is that entry-level W-2 hire. And so we're going to focus on the recruitment flywheel. There's 11 steps within this. So today, all I'm going to focus on is steps 6, 7, and 8. And that is because they are what we influence in our office, and our staff, and our people. And because they're so people driven, we can easily fix this in our company without costing us a penny or taking us forever. Like, you don't have to go create a new job ad or you have to do a bunch of stuff. These are things that we can fix and see the results in less than a couple days. And then if we get this right, then there's the bonus step of the transfer, and we'll cover that at the very end and what that means. I will answer questions at the end. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the chat. I also have a great download for you guys at the end. Again, I'm not going to fall short on my organizing background. I have a great download to help you guys with onboarding new employees. So let's jump right in. So in our recruitment flywheel, the process is steps 1 through 5. Our process is really about our impressions, our clicks, those apply starts, the actual people apply, and the people that pass. So if anybody's using an ATS or an applicant tracking system, a lot of times that's like Jazz HR, or that is Applicant Pro, things like that. This is where these really come in, right? That's that process. Or if you're just posting organically to Indeed or on social media, or if you're boosting Indeed ads, but it's your process. Those are 1 through 5. And if I want to go in and clean up my process, right, that could take a little bit of time. I would need to rewrite a new job ad. I would need to look at my benefits so I can get my impressions up, my clicks up. I would need to rework my ad so that I can get a better pass rate or more qualified applicants. So this here is a little bit of a heavier lift if we were just to jump into here. And then from here, we have our people side of recruiting. And this is what I'm going to dive deep on today, because this is one of the fastest things that we can fix today to get better results. Our scheduled rate, right? How many people do we have scheduling? What's our schedule look like? Our show rate. How can we dramatically increase that show rate? And then our offer. How fast can we extend an offer to someone? And are we prepared to extend an offer immediately? I skipped one. And then the last step in that flywheel is the partnership. This is where it becomes a partnership between that applicant and the business, right? Do they accept the offer? And then are they committing to the job? That means successfully finishing training. And then are we retaining them for culture? So, I was talking to Tessa before we started, and John, talking about, where do we typically see people fall off or not stick when it comes to the new hires? Is it 60 days in? Is it 90? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? And that's really going to help you when it comes to figuring out what part of that process needs to be refined. And so 38% of companies are always recruiting. Even though we know that this fixes a lot of issues for us, only 38% of companies are currently always recruiting. And I do a whole nother presentation called The Bench, which means it teaches you how to build your bench so that at any given time you can pull from an active pool of candidates. But 83% of us know that if we're understaffed, it lowers productivity. It dampens culture, and it can cost us business, right? Because it lowers quality as well if we're understaffed. So 83% of us know this, but only 38% of us are always recruiting. And so we need to make sure that we're looking at recruiting in a different way. Why is that? Well, I think when it comes to attracting the right fit, the first thing I would say is we need an employee avatar. What's your perfect fit employee look like? What are their characteristics? Because if we don't know what we're looking for, it's that Alice in Wonderland phrase, is that any road will take us there. So you need an employee avatar of what your ideal employee looks like. Now, we were taught to do this in marketing, right? We create that ICP. What's that avatar of that perfect customer look like? Well, we need to do the same thing when it comes to hiring. What do they look like? What are the values they have? What are the characteristics that they have? So that we know exactly what we're looking for when we're recruiting. And then there's the financial impact of what can it cost us if we're not always recruiting, right? What can it cost us when we're understaffed? So to always be recruiting, it can actually reduce your recruiting costs by 50%. Why is that? Well, because we're not starting and stopping. We're not spending a bunch of money sporadically. And it's also because we've gotten a process. We've mastered the process. We know how to interview. So many of us were taught in marketing, again, to do role play, sales calls, practice. But when we look at recruiting or interviewing, we just like wing it or figure it out. We don't tend to practice. And I have this saying is, don't practice on my money. So if you want to, if you really want to be great at recruiting and you want to know how to pick the right candidate, it's a skill. We have to practice it. We have to master it. It's another reason why we should always be interviewing, always be recruiting. And some people would say, well, I don't want to practice on real candidates. And I would say, but if they're a rock star, they checked every box, you're telling me you wouldn't hire them? And most people would say, no, I would hire them. Because there's one thing I've learned in business is that we can have two stresses. It's the stress of being understaffed and I have to turn away money, or it's the stress of being overstaffed and I have to go find that revenue. And so it's your choice of how you want to approach this. And so to always be recruiting gives us that ability to be more selective, to hire those rock stars when they walk in the door. Being understaffed is a stress that we all hate. Like, it keeps you up at night. But being overstaffed is a stress that creates growth, that creates hustle and innovation. Because I would rather have to go out and hit the pavement and do some guerrilla marketing, some social media to try to find that revenue to keep that person busy versus losing revenue because I'm understaffed. And so a bad hire can cost a business about $15,000. A bad hire. I didn't say turnover. It's a bad hire, right? Dampens culture. It hurts morale, bad quality, bad customer service. And so a bad hire can significantly hurt our business. And that's what happens when we're hiring out of desperation. We're hiring the least worst candidate. Well, the one I really liked didn't answer my email, so I'm just going to go ahead and pick this one. I mean, I've done that. And when we're always recruiting, we're not stuck with desperation. We're not hiring out of desperation. We're hiring out of good fit core values and quality. So we want to make sure, again, it's that always recruiting mentality. So how do I implement the portion of this flywheel, this profit flywheel or recruitment flywheel, into my company today? So that's what we're going to talk about. People, the people process. This part of the recruiting process is 100% driven by you or your office or your management staff. And that is the scheduled, right? That's the interview scheduled that creates volume that you need. You're showed. What is showed? Those are the people that actually attend your interview. That's value. Do you have enough value in your job offer to get them to show up, to get them to remember you? Because they didn't just apply to your job, they applied to 20 other jobs. And the really great candidates are only on the market for statistically 6 days. I want you to listen to that again. They're only on the market for 6 days. You do not know where they found you in those 6 days. You don't know. So if your process is taking weeks, you're going to lose out on great candidates because they're only out there for 6 days. And so it's this competition of, if they're great, can I snag them up? Can we commit before someone else does? And I'm not saying that you should rush to the offer. I'm saying you have to have a process to what you're doing. Because if you have a process, that creates speed, which creates scalability. And then it's your offered. That's what we just covered, the velocity. How fast can I offer the position if I know that that's a great hire? Well, we need that avatar. We need to know who is a great hire. What values do they possess? And so I'm going to get into the volume. And this is really when it comes to, these are real stats that I'm going to show you guys from reports that we give to our current customers. And this is volume. You have to have volume to be able to pick great candidates. If I only can interview like 2 or 3 people, statistically, that's not going to work out. I need volume to choose who are great fits, core value for my business. So I want to show you guys some stats. If you're not allowing the volume to come in when it comes to interviews. And so we teach, and anyone can do this, we teach stacked interviews. We do not encourage one-to-one interviews. And I don't even do one-to-one interviews with mid-level hires because of no-show rates. And I love to see how people interact with other people. So we teach stacked interviews. We stack 30 people into one time slot. Why? Because we have no more time as business owners, but the applicants have all the time in the world. So you don't have to stack 30, but you can stack 5, you can stack 10. And what we do is we call it stacked interview maximizer. And I actually have a free training on that, and I can give that to you guys at the end as well. But you're stacking them there. And what I want you guys to see is they were spending money on Indeed marketing their job post, but they maxed out their number of interview slots. They had 10 people pass and 10 people scheduled, but they had more people that couldn't schedule. So they raised their costs per offer, per hire, to $1,494 per hire. That's just the Indeed spend. And that is because they would not allow more volume. They only allowed 10 people in to interview in a rolling 4 weeks. This is a rolling 4 weeks. So let's look at somebody else who had an exponential amount of spaces because they did about 20 slots 2 times a day. And they were able to schedule 361 interviews and do 133 actual interviews that showed up. And they offered 14 jobs, but they brought down their costs because when we don't allow the volume to come in and we're doing one-to-one interviews, it's creating friction. There's not enough time and there's not enough spots. So you're creating friction and you're driving up your recruiting cost. And that's one reason why we hate hiring, because it's so expensive. So again, if you have time slots, say I'm going to interview twice a week, 3 times a week, or depending on your size, 5 times a week. I'm going to do them every day at 12 noon, and I'm going to allow 30 people to schedule at 12 noon. Therefore, you're bringing down your costs because you're creating less friction and you're letting people come in. And simply with the stacked interviews, it's like a doctor's waiting room. Great, have a seat. Here's a book about the company. Read it, start your one-to-one interviews, and they wait for you. It's very simple. It's very easy. Don't overthink it and don't get scared. A lot of people get nervous or anxious because there's people waiting on them, but it's okay because you're leveraging time. There's a great book. It's called Exponential Organization. I read it before. It's a software book. I actually read it before I had a software, but it's the only way. It's one of the only ways to create a unicorn company. So if you know what a unicorn company is, it is $100 million in 10 years. And they said to create this, you have to do one of 2 things or both things, but you have to either leverage time or leverage an asset. And so we all know the Airbnbs and the Ubers of the world, they leverage an asset. They leveraged a house, they leverage a car. So when I created WootRecruit, I wanted to leverage time. And so every part of my process is leveraging the applicant's time, because as an owner, I have no more time. I'm maxed out. And so this is why volume is so important when it comes to hiring. Therefore, we're not hiring out of desperation. We have more people to pick from. We're okay if nobody shows, like if we have a high no-show rate, who cares? We need to stop taking no-show rates personally. I know that's hard, but a lot of my friends in the industry take no-show rates. They get mad. It's personal, but there hasn't been a commitment on either side yet. And something in that applicant's life was more important than your job. And so now we want to talk about attending the interview, your show rate. the value. Is your job valuable enough for them to show up? Are you keeping their attention from the time you allow them, from the time they see your job ad to they schedule an interview, to they show up to the interview? Is your job valuable enough? Or is it sexy enough? Or does it look like everybody else's? Or is it just a cookie cutter of everybody else's? So you have to ask yourself, am I creating enough value for them to remember me? Because we live in a TikTok world. Everyone has about a 5-second memory. So is your job valuable enough for them to show up? One of my best tips for this is between the time that you schedule the interview till they come to from the time they apply to they schedule the interview, it needs to be compressed. I encourage everyone to not allow more than 2 days from when they apply to when they show up for the interview. Why? An applicant's world can change in the matter of a couple days. They can get a job, they can get offers, they could have sick kids, marital problems, financial issues, like you name it. And so we want to compress the time. The more days you allow between an applicant applying and them showing up to an interview, the higher your no-show rate is, and then the higher you're driving up your recruiting cost. It is applying more friction to that process. So try to keep them within 2 days because it's easy to keep someone's attention for that amount of time. And so I get this all the time, and this is going to be in the offered section as well. And so like, well, what if I don't have time to interview? Well, then you can't tell me that hiring is your number one issue. Because if it was, it needs to be your number one priority. And so we need to make sure that we have the ability to interview as often as possible. It just depends on how many people you need to hire. How desperate are we in this process? Because if it is our number one issue, it needs to be the number one focus. And then, so this is show rate. So these are some show rates. So statistically, the average show rate across, we recruit for about 25 different industries here at WootRecruit. And the average show rate now, listen to this, is 15%. Is average across hundreds and hundreds of companies, which is really horrible if you ask me. But here is the show rate of some people that are great, that are amazing, that you don't have to be average. Why do we settle for average? We're like, oh, well, the show rate, it sucks in our industry, but that's normal. That's the norm. But it doesn't have to be the norm, right? These companies have 100% show rate, a 95, 92, 82, 73, because what we're doing is we're creating a great job with high value, but also we are compressing the time that they can come to an interview. So literally like interview same day, next day, you can get a higher show rate. You can bring down your recruiting cost. But the other thing you can do is, and this is something that I'm super passionate about, is I call it net negative recruiting. It's a marketing term. But I see people change recruiting softwares like they change their underwear. And they typically leave all the applicants in the software. But those applicants, I can tell you right now, are worth more money than a customer, than a client. And so just because an applicant didn't qualify or wasn't a good fit at that time, doesn't mean they won't ever be. Because life changes. Maybe they have a car now. Maybe they have childcare now. Maybe they got divorced. Maybe they got married. And so we need to keep our applicants, because we're paying like Indeed and ZipRecruiter to constantly source, or social media to constantly source, where we need to start to collect our own pool of applicants that we can retarget to then also bring down our recruiting cost. And so my goal in life is to, and I'm very cautious of where I say this because I have a love-hate relationship with Indeed, is to actually take Indeed down in that service space, because they don't have the company at interest. Like they don't have us at their, they're not thinking of us. Everything that's made is really for that applicant. And I think it needs to be a mutual exchange. So I've been able to staff companies, giant companies, during their busy season in spring, or during the holidays, off of their past their past applicants, by retargeting and re-engaging and asking past applicants to come apply. We have this all built out into our software. You don't have to use our software. You can use your own software, or it's called any recruitment operating system software to do this, or you can simply build it out yourself. But please, please, please stop leaving your applicants inside of Indeed. Stop leaving them inside of ZipRecruiter, and start collecting them. They're worth more than an LTV of a customer. Because one of my great employees can generate about $100,000 a year. Some of them about 150. One customer for me only generates about maybe like $5,000, $7,000. But we will never leave our leads inside of our CRM, but we'll leave those applicants at a drop of a hat. So we need to change the way we think about this side of recruiting. And then here are some great stats on show rates. So a lot of us think, oh, well, I don't want a large company because then it's going to bring down my show rate, or I'm not going to have great quality applicants, or a lot of people get very scared about growing and growing fast. They had this company, I think is a $3 or $4 million company. Great hiring numbers, great recruiting numbers. We're still recruiting at a very low cost, $43 per hire, and getting a 49% show rate for their interviews, and interviewing 209 people, which is great stats for a large company. And then if you have great employer branding, I mean, amazing employer branding, if everything you put out on your website and social media is a reflection of how you treat not just your customers, but your employees, you can recruit for $0 and have amazing numbers still. And this goes back to that brand, that avatar. What are you looking for? So like one of the rules in my home service company is that we're never allowed to put a stock image up in our marketing. It's always a picture of an actual customer, or of an actual employee, or an actual job that we're doing. Why? Because people know that. They want to see what does it look like to work for you, or to visit your establishment. And so you can still have very good results, and it costs you no money, but this person has amazing employer branding on social media. And then this is a $5 million company with some amazing results, still getting about a 50% show rate and a 50% schedule rate from the volume of applicants that they're getting. One of the things, I'm not sure what everybody's here is using for recruiting, but I have a very, very strong stance when it comes to ATSs, and those are applicant tracking systems. And that is a pre-COVID way of recruiting. I feel like they're barbarically outdated and slow, and it does not give us the volume that we need of applicants so that we can choose who we want based on core values of our business, versus just settling because 3 people showed up. And so the next one is the velocity. I have to have speed to my offer. Why? Because they're only on the market for 6 days, right? I have to have speed to my offer. And if you don't have speed, again, it drives up your cost. And if you don't have speed to your offer, there's something I want you to think about. Like, this person only offered 4% of the people they interviewed. 4%. There's something that you should think about if I don't have that velocity. It's either a lack of confidence in your decision-making or in your picking, or it's a lack of process. And so who is doing the interviewing? Who is doing the picking, selecting of the candidate? It could be that there's a lack of confidence in your decision-making. So typically when we've been burnt, we've had some bad hires, we tend to pull back and slow down, which is fine, but that means we need a process. We need to interview everyone fairly and equally, and we need to score those applicants, those interviews, rate those interviews consistently. And so if we have a lack of speed, I want you just to think about this. Is it your lack of process, or is it your lack of confidence in choosing the right hire? Because again, if we need to hire, we cannot be slow at this process. We cannot be slow at selecting or offering that job. Because again, they're only on the market 6 days. So again, just showing some stats, we have a statistic goal that if you're offering about 10% of the people that you're interviewing a job, you want it to be above 10%, then you can say that you have confidence in your process or confidence in your selection. If you're below 10%, then you should probably reevaluate that offer. Why can't I offer quicker? Because if you offer a job and say, okay, well, I'll onboard you next Monday, and the applicant has to wait 5 days, some people just need a paycheck. It doesn't matter to them that you can't onboard yet, that you're too busy. They need a paycheck. So we need to keep these things in mind. Can we be quick at onboarding or at orientation or giving the offer? Do we have a process? Can we onboard when we find a great candidate tomorrow? I'm not sure about you guys, but I frequent like Home Depot and various places, and you find some really great people that work there, and you're kind of like, huh, I wonder how they got this person. Like, I wonder how they keep them. And I'm the kind of person that asks. And I'll be like, hey, why do you work here? Oh, well, they were interviewing and they interviewed on the spot and gave offers, and I just needed a job. And you would be surprised at that. And you would be surprised at the need for a paycheck. A lot of people work paycheck to paycheck. It's very common across all industries. And one of the things that we did in all my companies to change that, to make our offer sexier, is we pay weekly. And you would be surprised, is that more work? It is. But you would be surprised at the amount of people that attracts. We didn't really have to change a lot in the company. We just had to run payroll more often. So once you really master this flywheel and you look at your percentages, and again, there's a whole YouTube series on this flywheel. It's open for you guys to check out. I'll drop the link here at the end. But once you master, and you saw that person recruiting for $0 because their employer brand was so great, right? They had great culture. That's where the transfer comes in from retention, right? Back to attracting more people, because now they're sharing your job. They're recommending you. They're telling their friends. They're telling their neighbors. And people can then see that, and it creates this flywheel that never stops, that actually brings down our cost of hiring and recruiting. So again, this is just the breakdown of the process. And today we covered the 3 steps that are super, super impacted by people. You can change these today and see results tomorrow. So my second to last slide, I'm sorry I went on for a while. This is a free onboarding checklist if you guys would like to have it. It is a step-by-step process to help give your new hires a great experience. Because what I found is sometimes we just need a little bit more help. We work so hard to attract that great candidate, and once we have them, we're like, oh crap, I don't have a process for onboarding. And giving that applicant a great experience from the time you hire to onboarding them into your company. And lastly, I want you guys to think of recruiting like marketing. We track our marketing number, our leads, our closes, how many customers we have. And we need to start looking at recruiting that way, because when we do, we can become a more profitable company.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Libby. Appreciate it. I feel
You're
like I want to
welcome.
give the applause. Thumbs up from John. I'll just open this up. If anyone has any questions or comments or anything that stood out from Libby's talk, please, by all means, jump on in. You can unmute yourself. We got a small group here, so and we've got about 10 or so minutes to go. So,
Hi there. Hi, Tessa.
hi.
I have a question. There was a slide where she had 9 different bullet points, and I got the first part. It was like scheduled, showed, and then I missed one. And I have accept, commit, retain. There
This
you
one?
go.
Yeah, the first few.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. And I dropped the YouTube link in there, and I cover in YouTube a video on every one of these.
Awesome. I appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I see John's sign to Indeed. Yeah. His emoji from Indeed. We directly integrate with Indeed in our software. So we have like a love-hate relationship. They can be pretty rough to work with, but we do comply with all their rules because we want to make sure that, we can still use them, but like I have an ultimate goal of crushing them.
Of unseating the giant.
I'd love to see that, because I also have love-hate relationship with them. Mostly hate, because I seem to just pour money into it, and occasionally it spits something out the bottom. So it's been really insightful, really cool to see. I'll throw a question at you if nobody else has one straight away. You mentioned about, I think you called it an ATS, the tracking software. I'm not even familiar what that is, and I haven't really paid too much attention to the stats in Indeed, but you said that that's really shifted since like pre-COVID to now. What is that shift?
Well, so an applicant tracking software, it's an ATS. So it's typically any recruiting software that you're using out there. We're not an ATS. So we actually have account managers that almost like Google AdWords managers, but we're managing your Indeed account, we're managing your posting, we're managing your budget, because we have a service side to our software. An ATS, I have a very, like I said, strong stance on this, and it's because what an ATS does is it scores your applicants, right? It's giving them a score, but unless you have the money to create your own fingerprint, it's biased, right? You don't, it's made for, you have no idea what profession, what industry, what gender, right? So, because I found a lot sometimes are very, it's going to sound funny, but very male heavy, and they actually weeded out a lot of women. Because again, it's made off a fingerprint and it's scoring the applicant based off that fingerprint, but you have no idea what it was made for. So unless you have like $100 grand to make your own fingerprint, it's going to be biased. And so you could be filtering out some really great applicants, but it's also barbarically slow. It is so slow when recruiting is all about speed, not impulsive, but it's all about how can I get that best applicant in front of me? And then how can I commit to that great applicant as well? So it's much too slow.
Okay, yeah, cool.
In my own opinion. And so, yes, I think the pre-COVID, they worked pretty well. I launched WootRecruit during COVID, so it was a great test because we knew that during COVID was one of the worst times to recruit. And we learned a lot. We exploded as a business. And but I think, we were talking about this prior, and for everybody that's listening, what everyone wants right now, whether you're an owner, a manager, just an entry-level employee, everybody wants to work how I want, when I want, and where I want. Those are the 3 things that COVID did to us. And I don't care who you are and in what level you're working in. right? How I want, when I want, and where I want. So if you're listening to like the Uber commercials, the Instacart, the, you know, remote work from home stuff, it's very attractive right now. And so I said, well, I was in a hotel getting ready to present on stage, and I heard that commercial. It was a commercial from, I think, Instacart. And they said, get paid the same day, have no boss. You don't even need a car. You can Instacart on your bike or something. And I looked at my husband and I said, how is Organize It supposed to compete with that? I have a whole bunch of field technicians, right? A whole bunch of office staff. How are we supposed to compete with that? Like, I can't even compete with that. And so for a brief moment, I got scared. And then I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. How can I start to talk about my job so that it delivers the things that they want? So we did a few things in our home service company where, okay, work how I want. Well, you know, we work in teams of one, so you can kind of work how you want, but we still train you. But we give them a lot of freedom. So we work very asynchronously. I'm a huge asynchronous fan. So they get that freedom to say, okay, I can work how I want within these parameters, as long as I know this is the end result. Here's my end result. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. When I want. We created windows of time that they could work in, right? It's only like a 1 hour window of time that they have to show up to work. They just have to show up to work between 8 and 9. Then they leave at 5 or 6. It's the same time frame, but we just created a window of arrival time. But I could say, work when you want between this time frame. And then where I want, you know, that one is a little bit harder to achieve, but you know, so I have a very traditional job, like we're cleaning. And it's very traditional, but it's like, how can I talk about it? So we say you work from an app because our entire schedule is on an app. So you can compete with, hey, work from an app. Well, they are working from an app. So it's like, how can I reposition my current job and not even change anything? So how can I talk about it in a way that's more appealing to my perfect fit avatar? And for me, it was trying to attract great parents. It was trying to attract parents that wanted to be in their kids' life. And so the reason we did the window of arrival time was so if people had kids, they could drop their kids off or pick them up, right? But you had to pick one or the other, because if you came late, you stayed a little later. But that really helps because people didn't have to pay for before care. Or aftercare, because the other spouse could do it. So it's creating like that tiny bit of flexibility within your job, but still has bumpers. So it's not so just black and white, because life is not black and white.
Yeah, so I think in our industry, it's, you know, we have pretty rigid start times for classes, so some of that's unavoidable, but we can frame our marketing toward, you know, our advertising that they choose their shifts when they want to work. So yeah, there's that flexibility for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so you have to just think outside the box a little bit and say, how can I reword this? What can we do? If you could choose your own shift, like, hey, that's great. Work when I want.
Yeah, I like that. Awesome.
Absolutely. I also love the idea of just that employee avatar, Libby. I think that's, you know, super strong takeaway as well. You know, especially in our world, we have these avatars of our customers. We even, you know, more recently have avatars of our current trainers and maybe how they align with our customers. But how often are we, you know, kind of porting that to the recruiting process and trying to, you know, align all of those dots, right, on the front end before we get into kind of the back end and everything in studio. So, you know, I love that too, because it's, to your point, it creates that fingerprint or filter. Like that's now what you're using to really evaluate, you know, people that are coming through, and you have a real reason to use it because you know that fit and how it has to culturally fit into your business. So love that.
Yeah. We a great tip to start creating that avatar. It's a simple step. I paid an EOS implementer like 80 grand to learn this. Is take your 2 best fit employees. They could be current, they could be past. We picked 2 completely different segments. We picked a younger person, and then we picked like one of our older employees. It was great. Like, so we didn't just, they were broad ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so what we did as a leadership team was brain dump on a whiteboard all of the characteristics they embodied, like everything. What makes them great? Why do we love them? And then we started to map out those characteristics and merge them together until we got 5 core characteristics that embody them. You're going to see some really common trends. It's a great exercise. It's super simple to do. And then you're going to create your avatar from those 5 core characteristics those people embody.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I'll just open up one last time. SBJ, Michael, Lashnae, Jesse, if y'all have anything you want to add here at the end. Otherwise, we'll call it a night. But really appreciate you jumping on, Libby. And I think everyone got a bunch from this session. And thank you all for joining us.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Have a great night.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Take care.